Some wounds don't bleed, they break the heart. And for Noah Monroe, the deepest pain he ever felt wasn't from a knife or a gun. It was from his own family. Growing up, he wasn't hungry, homeless, or poor. He had it all, except for one thing: his father's love. Please support the channel by hitting the subscribe and like button. Let's dive in. From the outside, the Monroe family was the image of wealth and success. Their fortune was not new, it was built over generations, passed down like a crown from father to son. And at the center of it all was Jonathan Monroe, a man who embodied power, precision, and control. Jonathan had inherited Monroe Industries, a multimillion-dollar empire spanning real estate, manufacturing, and high-end retail. His father, William Monroe, had laid the foundation, but it was Jonathan who transformed the company into an unstoppable force. While he had been born into wealth, he never allowed himself to grow complacent. He worked harder than anyone, often spending 18-hour days building deals, expanding markets, and ensuring the Monroe name remained untouchable. He was a man of iron discipline, one who believed that success was not a gift but a relentless pursuit. He never took shortcuts, never tolerated failure, and never made room for weakness. Jonathan's work ethic was legendary. Employees whispered about his ability to predict market trends before they happened, his ruthless negotiation tactics, and the sheer force of his willpower. While other heirs of wealthy families indulged in luxury and lived off their trust funds, Jonathan was different. He didn't just want to maintain the wealth, he wanted to multiply it. He was at his desk before dawn and rarely left before midnight. He had no patience for excuses, no sympathy for mediocrity. "You want success," he would often say. "Then earn it. No one hands you a legacy, you either build it or you destroy it." Jonathan demanded perfection not only from himself but from everyone around him. He surrounded himself with people who worked just as hard. His two sons, Liam and Noah, were expected to follow in his footsteps. And while both worked tirelessly under their father's rule, there was always a clear distinction between them. Jonathan made no effort to hide it. Liam, the eldest, was everything his father wanted: a sharp businessman, a smooth talker, and someone who never questioned his authority. He was the golden child, the chosen one. Noah, on the other hand, was different. He worked just as hard, sometimes harder, but his efforts were always overshadowed. No matter what he did, it was never enough. At every meeting, every family event, every conversation, the favoritism was clear. "Liam, you have a natural talent," Jonathan would often say, clapping his eldest son on the back. "One day, you'll be running this empire." And then he would glance at Noah. "Try to learn something from your brother." The words cut deep, even though Noah pretended they didn't. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. His mother, Eleanor, and his sister, Isabel, saw it all. They watched as Noah's ideas were dismissed, his efforts diminished, and his voice drowned out in a room where he was supposed to belong. They saw the way Jonathan praised Liam for achievements Noah had done first, how a strategy Noah spent weeks perfecting was suddenly credited to Liam, how a deal Noah secured was celebrated as Liam's victory. They saw it all. They saw the way Noah's jaw clenched in quiet frustration, the way his hands would curl into fists under the table when Jonathan brushed him aside like an afterthought. They saw the flicker of hope in his eyes every time he tried to impress their father, only to watch it be extinguished over and over again, until it became clear that no matter how hard he tried, it would never be enough. And yet, they said nothing. Not once did Eleanor raise her voice and say, "Jonathan, that was Noah's idea." Not once did Isabel look their father in the eye and say, "Dad, Don't you see how hard Noah is trying? Instead, they let the injustice unfold, choosing the comfort of silence over the conflict of truth. It wasn't that they didn't care. Eleanor loved her son, but she had spent her entire life playing the role of the obedient wife, the woman who stood beside her husband but never against him. She had watched Jonathan carve their empire with his own 2 hands, and in that process, she had learned that arguing with him was futile. He was a man who did not bend, did not listen, did not change. So she convinced herself that staying quiet was easier. And Isabel? She was young, caught between loyalty and fear. She adored her brothers equally, but deep down, she knew that Noah was suffering. She could see the pain in his eyes, the bitterness growing in his voice. But she also knew what it felt like to be on the receiving end of their father's cold indifference. And she wasn't strong enough to risk it. So she, too, stayed silent. And that silence, it hurt more than Jonathan's rejection. Because at least Noah had expected his father to favor Liam. At least he knew where he stood with Jonathan. But his mother, his sister, they were supposed to be different. They were supposed to see him. Yet every time he needed them to speak, they didn't. They let him stand alone. And that was a betrayal Noah never recovered from. One evening, the Monroes gathered for dinner. The air was thick with tension, as it often was when business was discussed. Noah sat across from his father and brother, his fingers gripping his fork tightly. "I had a meeting with the investors today," Noah began. "I pitched a new strategy to increase our overseas market." His father barely looked up from his plate. "And?" Jonathan muttered. "They loved it," Noah said, his voice tinged with hope. "They want to implement it immediately." Liam smirked, swirling his wine glass. "Overseas markets are complicated, Noah. You don't have the experience to handle that kind of pressure." "I've worked on this for months," Noah shot back. "I know what I'm doing." Jonathan sighed. "Liam's right. You don't have the expertise for this kind of thing." Noah clenched his fists under the table. "I built this strategy. I secured the investors. Why shouldn't I lead the project?" Jonathan finally looked up, his gaze sharp. "Because I said so." Silence filled the room. Noah swallowed the lump in his throat. "You never even gave me a chance." His father's expression was blank. "Because I don't need to. I already know the outcome." Isabel looked down at her plate. Eleanor shifted uncomfortably in her seat. But neither of them spoke up. Noah's appetite vanished. The message was clear: he would always be second best. At least Noah had Emily. She was his safe place. His peace. The one person who made him feel like he mattered. Or so he thought. She saw how hard he worked for the family business, and to impress his dad and to gain his father's love. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. But lately, she had been acting distant, answering texts late, avoiding eye contact, spending more time at the Monroe estate even when he wasn't there. "Is something wrong?" Noah had asked one evening. Emily had forced a smile. "Of course not, Noah. You overthink things." But the uneasy feeling in his gut wouldn't leave. And then, one night, he found out why. Noah arrived at the Monroe estate earlier than his usual, exhausted from another long day of fighting for his father's approval. As he stepped inside, he heard hushed voices coming from the living room. Liam's voice. And Emily's. Curiosity turned to dread as he stepped closer. "You need to talk to Noah," Liam was saying. "He's getting too attached." Noah's breath caught in his throat. "I know," Emily sighed. "But he's just so desperate for love." I feel bad. Noah's body went numb. Then end it, Liam said smoothly. You and I both know you were never meant for him. You're meant for someone stronger. Someone like me. A pause. And then, Emily whispered, I know. Noah felt his stomach drop. He stepped into the room, his voice raw with betrayal. So this is what you've been doing? Emily and Liam turned in shock. Noah, Emily began. Don't, Noah cut her off. Just don't. Liam leaned back against the couch, smirking. Come on, little brother. Did you really think she wanted to be with you? Noah's blood boiled. You took everything from me. Liam's smirk didn't fade. I didn't take anything. She chose me. Noah turned to Emily, his voice breaking. You were the one person I thought was on my side. She hesitated, then lowered her gaze. I'm sorry, Noah. But there was no real regret in her voice. And at that moment, Noah realized he was truly alone. One day, after another fallout with his brother and father, Noah sat on the cold stone steps outside the Monroe estate, a single duffel bag at his feet. It held everything he had left, just a few clothes, his wallet, and whatever little dignity he had managed to salvage from the wreckage of his life. The house behind him loomed in the night, grand and powerful, just like his father, just like Liam. A place filled with people who shared his blood but never truly felt like family. He tilted his head back, staring at the sky. The stars blinked above him, distant, indifferent. Just like them. The night breeze was cool, rustling the trees, but Noah barely felt it. The pain in his chest was heavier. Footsteps approached. Hesitant. Slow. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Noah. His mother's voice was soft, careful. He inhaled deeply but didn't look at her. His fingers curled into fists. Don't. His voice was quiet but sharp, cutting through the still night air. Isabel stood beside Eleanor, her eyes red and puffy. She clutched her hands together like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Please don't go, Isabel finally whispered, her voice shaking. Noah let out a hollow laugh before turning to face them. His eyes, once full of love and longing for their approval, were now cold. Tell me the truth. His voice was eerily calm. Eleanor frowned. Noah, what do you? Am I adopted? He interrupted, his throat tight, his heart pounding in his chest. His mother flinched as if he had struck her. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. What? She whispered, her voice cracking. Because it sure as hell doesn't feel like I'm part of this family, Noah continued, his jaw clenched. It doesn't feel like I belong here. It never has. Eleanor's face crumpled. Noah, you're my son. Then why does it feel like I was just tolerated instead of loved? His voice wavered, but he refused to let himself cry. Isabel wiped her tears, but she didn't say anything. Neither did Eleanor. And that silence. It hurt more than all the years of rejection. Noah exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. You saw it happening, he said, his voice empty. You knew. And you said nothing. His mother dropped her gaze, shame washing over her features. Noah. Isabel began, her voice barely above a whisper. Say it, he pushed, his voice raw. Say that you knew. Say that you watched Dad treat me like a nobody. Say that you saw Liam take everything from me and you just stood there. The silence stretched between them. Heavy. Unforgiving. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice weak. What could we have done? Noah let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You could have fought for me, he said, his voice breaking. You could have tried. But they didn't. They never did. Eleanor wiped a tear from her cheek. Isabel sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. But neither of them stopped him. Noah swallowed hard, his chest tightening as he took in the two people who were supposed to love him unconditionally. "I'm done." Eleanor gasped softly. "Noah." "No," he cut her off, his voice steady now. "I spent my whole life trying to prove that I belonged in this family. But I was never really a part of it, was I?" No one answered. Because they couldn't. And that told him everything. Dad made his choice. Liam made his choice. And you? He looked between Eleanor and Isabel, his voice hollow. You made yours too. His mother stepped forward, reaching for him. But Noah stepped back. He had nothing left to say. Without another word, he picked up his bag and turned away. The gravel crunched beneath his feet as he took step after step toward something new. The sound of Isabel's muffled sobs filled the night, but he didn't stop. Not this time. Not ever again. As he reached the front gates, a final truth settled in his chest, heavy, cold, and undeniable. His father had never loved him. His brother had never respected him. His mother and sister had never defended him. And Emily, she had never truly been his. For years, he had fought to belong. But some battles aren't meant to be won. Some families aren't meant to be kept. And sometimes, the only way to find peace is to walk away. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. Years passed. Noah built a new life, one that had nothing to do with the Monroe name. He had left behind the cold walls of that mansion, the suffocating expectations, and the crushing weight of never being enough. At first, it wasn't easy. The scars of rejection, of being treated like he didn't belong, weren't things he could just forget. The pain didn't disappear overnight. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to prove himself to anyone. And that was freeing. He went to therapy, something he knew his father would have scoffed at. But he didn't care. He needed to heal. He needed to understand why he had spent so many years fighting for a place in a family that had never truly wanted him. Week by week, session by session, he started to piece himself back together. He stopped carrying the weight of his father's rejection. He stopped replaying the betrayal of his brother. He stopped looking for love in the people who had refused to give it. Instead, he focused on himself. He built his confidence, not as Jonathan Monroe's forgotten son, but as Noah Monroe, his own man. He discovered what made him happy, what he was passionate about, what life outside of his father's shadow really felt like. And for the first time ever, he was truly happy. Jonathan never reached out. Not once. And that told Noah everything he needed to know. His mother and Isabel sent messages now and then, asking how he was, saying they missed him, but he never really responded. Not because he hated them, but because he knew they would only drag him back emotionally. He had spent too long trying to be someone they would defend, someone they would stand up for. But he wasn't going to live in their guilt. As for Liam, well, Liam never cared. So neither did Noah. He didn't miss the past. He didn't long for his family's approval anymore. Then, one evening, his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but when he saw Isabel's name flash on the screen, something in him hesitated. He picked up. Noah, her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "What's wrong?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. There was a pause, then a slow inhale. Dad passed away. The words settled in his mind, yet he felt nothing. No anger. No relief. No grief. Just nothing. He closed his eyes, the memories of his father flashing through his mind, not of warmth or love, but of cold stares, dismissive words, and an endless feeling of not being enough. "Are you coming to the funeral?" Isabel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Noah let out a slow breath. No. He didn't owe that man anything. Because the truth was, his father had died in his heart long before his body ever did. And some wounds, they don't heal. They just stop mattering. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.